Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Teena Jha, you're watching Perspective. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar concluded a 3-day visit to Russia from the 19th to the 21st of August, where he co-chaired the 26th session of the India-Russia Inter-Governmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technological and Cultural Cooperation. Now, this visit also included high-level engagements with the Russian leadership, reaffirming the depth of the India-Russia strategic partnership. During his meeting with President Vladimir Putin, Dr. Jaishankar conveyed personal greetings from President Draupadi Murmu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders discussed key aspects of the bilateral agenda as well as pressing global issues, including developments related to Ukraine. At the 26th session of the Inter-Governmental Commission, which was co-chaired by Dr. Jaishankar and Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov, both sides emphasized on the need to address tariff and non-tariff trade barriers, removing logistics bottlenecks and promoting connectivity, ensuring smooth payment mechanisms, early conclusion of the India-Eurasian Economic Union FTA, and timely finalization of the program of economic cooperation till 2030. The Commission also underlined the importance of sustaining energy cooperation through trade and investments, with an eye on achieving the revised bilateral trade target of $100 billion by the year 2030. In his talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Dr. Jaishankar undertook a comprehensive review of bilateral ties, covering areas such as trade, defense, military, technical cooperation and connectivity initiatives. Both sides agreed to fast-track the opening of 2 new Indian consulates in Kazan and Ekaterinburg. On the global stage, India and Russia reaffirmed their commitment to the reform of global governance structures and vowed to work together in forums like the G20, BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Also on terrorism, both nations resolved to fight jointly against all forms and manifestations of the threat. Dr. Jaishankar reiterated India's zero-tolerance approach towards terrorism and also underscored New Delhi's sovereign right to defend its citizens against cross-border terror. So in this edition of Perspective, we are going to discuss the significance of Dr. S. Jaishankar's Moscow visit and the reaffirmed commitment by both nations to expand trade, enhance energy cooperation and deepen strategic ties amid shifting global equations. For this, I'm joined by 2 distinguished guests. Allow me to introduce them to you. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome on the program today former Ambassador S.R. Tayal. Ambassador, glad to have you with us on this broadcast. Welcome to Sansad TV. And I'm also pleased to welcome Dr. Captain Alok Bansal, Executive Vice President, India Foundation. Dr. Bansal, glad to have you with us on this telecast. It's been a long time, so absolute pleasure to welcome you on this edition of Perspective. Ambassador, let me pose the first question to you. Given the complex geopolitical situation, help us and our viewers understand first about the significance of the visit. So in Moscow, we heard the External Affairs Minister say that India and Russia have been the steadiest of the major relationships in the world after the Second World War. And this was a sentiment which was also echoed by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. From a diplomatic perspective, sir, how important was this visit in reaffirming that legacy of India-Russia ties?
It was an extremely important visit to reaffirm the permanence of India first Soviet Union and now Russia ties. And our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, made some very pithy remarks. He said that the relations now and even earlier are based on geopolitical convergence, leadership contacts, and popular sentiment. And even if we see from the 60s to 70s, 80s, and now, there has been a convergence in the world view of Soviet Union earlier, Russia now, and India. And it was very emphatically said by Foreign Minister Lavrov, for instance, that they want a multipolar architecture for international relations, and that would perhaps apply both for global level and Indo-Pacific level. Now, on contacts, I would say that, of course, in the last 11 years, the personal contacts have been taken to new heights, both by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Vladimir Putin. But if we look back, then in the 50s, between Prime Minister Nikita Khrushchev and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, between President Leonid Brezhnev and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and since President Putin came 2001 or 2, with Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and of course with Prime Minister Modi. So there is a certain permanence, certain in the relationship, and the foundations are very deep, whether it is our defense, whether it is our economics. Public sector is now much derided, but at that point in 50s, India had no industry at all. So now, at that time, it was perhaps the requirement of Indian economy. Then popular sentiment. Now, this is another. I have done a posting in Moscow, and one can see the friendship towards India, the popular sentiment of great regard for India, which the Aam Janta of Russia has, and of entire Soviet Union at the time, but now Russia has, and the same sentiment for among the citizens of India, because we every citizen recognizes who stood with India when India was in difficult times. And sorry to use those words, but when United States stabbed India in the back, whether it was the 50s, whether it was the 71 war with Bangladesh, then who used vetoes? 5 times in 5 different issues, Soviet Union has used its veto in India's favor. India is a very deep civilization. We do not forget these things. And these are the foundation of a policy of trust, a relationship of trust between India and Russia.
Certainly, and in many ways, Dr. Bansal, this visit, in addition to further strengthening and laying out a roadmap to further deepen India-Russia ties, this visit in a lot of ways, and considering the global political upheaval, the geopolitical upheaval, I beg your pardon, this visit also helped mark a strong assertion of India's strategic autonomy by the External Affairs Minister. It was keenly watched not just in Delhi and Moscow, but the entire world, given that it comes amid the US tariffs that have been imposed on India. But what stood out, and what a lot of analysts have also written about, is the firm reiteration by our External Affairs Minister about India's foreign policy being guided only by national interest. In fact, he not just went to Moscow and spoke about deepening the energy cooperation with Russia. At a press conference, he also said he is quite perplexed. India is quite perplexed by the US logic on the tariffs, since India is not the largest buyer of Russian oil or gas. Do you also see this as India's clearest message yet to the West, that we will not be dictated to and our foreign policy will be decided only in New Delhi, guided solely by national interest?
As Ambassador Tayal said, I think India right from beginning has cherished its strategic autonomy. We have never ever compromised with our strategic autonomy.
Yes.
And Soviet Union earlier and Russia has always stood with us whenever we have been in crisis, be it in 50s when the Western world was supporting Pakistan on Kashmir, it was the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries which continued to support us. In 71, when US went to China and created an alliance against India, and India was actually in a corner, and we signed the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Friendship. And even today, what is even more important is that being an Oriental society, our views don't change overnight, that we are seeing in some of the Occidental societies, where people do flip-flops. We actually remain true to our feelings. And I think as far as popular perception is concerned, Russia is viewed as a friend. And similar is the sentiment to a very great extent in Russia. And that's why we are bound. And what EAM has done is that he has actually told the world, blatantly as to what has happened. I think the US actions were very, very illogical. We are neither the largest importer of oil. They could not put tariffs on China because China has leverage against them. We are neither the largest importer of gas, which EU is, and EU are their allies. So what EAM said was that if US thought that they could arm twist India into changing or compromising on its national interest, India is not going to do that. Right. And I think that was a big mistake for any Western country. And I think, as we had said earlier, that we have time-tested relationship with Russia. And what is more important you need to understand is that there is one sector where our relationship with Russia has been overwhelming, and that's the sector of defense. I think right from 60s, Russia and formerly Soviet Union has been the mainstay of arms imports that we have actually received. They were the major suppliers of hardware which our defense forces received. And even today, when we have emerged as a big manufacturer of defense hardware, there are huge collaborations. There are many platforms where we are using Russian weapon systems, Russian sensors. There have been places where we have successfully integrated Russian weapon systems with Western sensors. Mm-hmm. So this defense force field and our overwhelming dependence on Russia for our defense equipment and hardware, coupled with an Oriental mindset where you cannot ditch your friends at the behest of others. I think that has stood the test of time, and we have shown it to the world that in post-Second World War, this relationship has remained steady and has stood the test of time. And that's what's been shown. I think through and through, from 60s onwards till today, we have remained close friends, even earlier, in fact, if you look at 50s also. So this friendship has continued. And what EM said, he said very blatantly and clearly that India's policies will be governed by India's national interest, and no third power can dictate to India. And I think that's been very clearly articulated.
That clearly has guided also. Yes. That clearly has guided the emphasis, Ambassador, also on how we saw both countries talking about sustaining energy cooperation, including LNG trade, the projects in Russia's Far East, also in the Arctic energy ventures. Give us a sense of how central has Russia been to India's not just short-term but long-term energy interests, and especially at a time when we are looking at a transition towards a more sustainable and green future. How central is Russia to that energy transition phase that India is currently witnessing?
India-Russia economic relations, one can see can be in two major parts. One, of course, is the energy relationship, which also goes back decades. Indian ONGC Videsh has invested in Kamchatka and Russian Far East, and some of those investments are doing very well, and those wells are doing well. Then there is an offer from Russia that India can invest more in the development of new fields, etc. Then, of course, we are buying oil from Russia. In the last 2-3 years, the amount has increased quite a bit because it is the most economical oil available in the market. See, oil market is very fungible. So India will buy, as has been repeatedly said by all our ministers, including Petroleum Minister Mr. Deepti Vashisth, that Indian companies buy from wherever oil is available at the most economical and cheapest rates. So that is one part. Then the other is that there is a trade imbalance. There is a huge trade imbalance of almost $60 billion now last year with Russia. And now this is a problem which is like a generic problem with India's foreign trade with many other countries, except of course with the United States. So the solutions have to be found to bridge this trade deficit, and certain areas have been identified in day before yesterday's Joint Commission meeting. Pharmaceuticals, textiles, because textile sector will be hit very badly.
Yes.
India's textile exports, if this 25% or 50% tariff imposed by US holds. So we need more markets for our textiles. And then agriculture also remains an area where Russia is deficient in some ways, and it imports a lot of agricultural products from European Union countries. That's now coming through Belarus to Russia because there are sanctions against trade with Russia. So, as an aside, I'll say that Europe Union countries are defying all kinds of sanctions against Russia by routing those agricultural products to third countries. Anyway, that is a separate issue. But the Far East is an area which is very rich in minerals, in all kinds of resources. And there, Vladivostok forum have taken place. Prime Minister Modi himself had participated. He was the chief guest at one of the forums 3-4 years back, I recall. But not much investment from Indian private sector has happened there. That is where new opportunities have to be found. And I must say that somehow our private sector should be more bold, more entrepreneurial, and invest more in Russia's Far East, where enormous profits can be made. Then another aspect which was covered in External Affairs Minister's visit is this whole issue of mobility. India has surplus human capacity in skilled labor, in IT, in engineers, and Russia, the population is declining. It is an aging society. So that is another area where Indian participation can be in the further development of Russian agriculture, infrastructure, etc., through skilled workers, engineers, technicians, IT sector. And that will also help bridge this deficit because the services also lead to income generation. And if one, for instance, with the US, there is in services, US has a surplus against India. Right. So there are many new directions for India-Russia trade and investment which have been explored. And the thing is, these are not new. They have been talked about for many years, but more energy is required to push all those projects which are on the drawing board but have not progressed further.
Okay, let me also get in Dr. Bansal's views on how to address the trade imbalance, which has gone up from 6.6 billion to almost about 59.8 billion in recent years, Dr. Bansal. So, taking on from what Ambassador said, what kind of bold initiatives, something that Dr. Jaishankar said, the bold and new initiatives from both sides need to be taken to address that trade imbalance. But the second part is also about connectivity and logistics. They were also huge talking points in that important meeting, like the international north-south transport corridor, the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor. Help us and our viewers understand how these have the potential to become game changers, but what are the obstacles and what are the hurdles that we need to immediately address?
See, one of the things which we need to understand, and in fact, last year I went to Moscow and had a look, is that Russian society now and Russian markets are still flooded with Western brands. Mm-hmm. I think many of those products which are flooding the Russian stores are produced in India also. In fact, many of the textile brands which flooded the Moscow stores actually were probably made in India, Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, but with some Western brands. So I think our private sector consumer goods need to start moving into Russia in a big way. When the Soviet Union was there, we had a rupee-ruble trade under which a lot of consumer goods used to be exported from India to Soviet Union. That, of course, got disrupted once the Soviet Union disintegrated. But I think we need to do a better marketing of our consumer goods, and I think there is a huge market for them. The trade deficit has increased because of our huge imports that we have been importing in terms of energy, and this is a recent phenomena. And as Ambassador Tayal said, I think Russian population, which was shrinking after 90s, has started stabilizing, but still needs manpower. In fact, if Russia-Ukraine war has shown one weakness of Russia, it is the paucity of men on ground. I think Russians have had to depend on armed militias, mercenaries, Chechen mercenaries, or private mercenaries, only because they didn't have boots on ground. And I think for a long time, Russia, like Japan, has been slightly xenophobic in allowing that sort of immigration. And I think that's one of the reasons why there has not been, though of course there are some Indians who have gone. In fact, in one of the border areas there, we found one of the Indians was elected to the local legislature. So we have, but I think this needs to increase. And one of the reasons why this has not taken place is I think that the private sector has really not invested in a big way in Russia. And that's been because there has been certain apprehensions as far as the rule of law is concerned, because Russia is still seen as a relatively closed society. Probably people feel that whether the private sector firms will get right redressal in case of any disputes. So that's probably the thing. I think that needs to be rectified. And once that is rectified, you will see huge investments coming from India into Russia. As far as connectivity is concerned, it's a real big problem. In fact, traditionally, we had connectivity with Eurasian heartland. I think in modern times that has got disrupted. After Pakistan came into being, our access to Afghanistan and beyond has got obstructed. Iran, unfortunately, has had a tiff with the West world, which has been going on, and it has really not subsided. So north-south transport corridor, which goes through Iran, though huge potential, has really not taken off. And in fact, not only in Iran, the whole region, even above it, Armenia, Azerbaijan, despite the ceasefire, doesn't seem to be very stable to me. Of course, Central Asian route is a better route probably at this point of time and could probably be used. But at the moment, I don't see an overland route fructifying unless, of course, we are willing to take a new concept and start from Karakoram Pass to Kyrgyzstan. That could be a route which could actually take Indian goods to Central Asia and beyond that to Eurasian heartland, and that we could look at, but that would require a huge recalibration of our policy options and the way we have been looking at this part of the world till now. Now, yes. Chennai-Vladivostok is a maritime corridor, and it's a fairly good corridor, but still, remember, this is not a short distance. It's a fairly long distance. It's a good it's a viable corridor, but as of now, we are really not getting much from Vladivostok except for energy. That's what is coming. So we really need to invest more in that part of the world so that we have more movement of goods from Chennai to Vladivostok, and Indian goods can probably go. As far as food grains is concerned, I think Russia doesn't need food grains, but other agricultural products, there is actually a huge scope which we can export to them, because wheat, I think they are a net exporter, as you know. So wheat, and as far as edible oils are concerned, they are exporters, but other things can be exported. But as I said, I think India should really explore consumer goods, because Moscow's stores still are actually selling the Western brands. And I think
that's a wonderful suggestion. But Ambassador, since you've stayed in Moscow, I am curious to know what is stopping the Indian investors, the private players, to go and invest big in Russia. Several factors Dr. Bansal has mentioned, but as someone who's stayed there and you understand the rule of law as well in the country, secondly, if there is skepticism, what are we doing, or what have we done in the last few years to encourage them to go and invest, so that all of these hurdles that we have just spoken about can be taken care of, and the potential that remains untapped can be explored fully?
Well, as Captain Bansal said, that there is a lack of faith in Indian investors, major Indian companies, even Indian entrepreneurs who are operating there, that in case there is a dispute with their local partner, local supplier, then the local authorities, judicial system, taxation system, everybody sides with the Russian partner without going into objectivity of the issue. and that is a huge problem as far as investment is concerned. Now, that is a larger question, and it is very difficult for the government of India to be able to convince Indian entrepreneurs that it is safe, because this is both their own experience and anecdotal, that some other countries, some trade entrepreneur was not allowed to leave the country, and if there was a dispute with some Russian company. So these are issues, and that's why, despite a great goodwill among the people and great understanding and encouragement from the top leadership, somehow the private entrepreneurs have not, they find it safer to operate in South Asia, in Sri Lanka, and other countries, of course, European countries, and even Uzbekistan, etc. They have been operating, but there is a sense of apprehension in their increasing their operations in Russia. But the embassy and they can come in and try to convey this at appropriate levels in among the Russian friends, authorities, and there could be some fast track for looking after the grievances of Indian entrepreneurs, etc. There could be some creative solution could be found.
Certainly. Let's hope that in the times to come it changes. But let me also delve into another aspect from trade and economic cooperation. Let's talk about defense and military technical cooperation, Ambassador. These have always been pillars of India-Russia ties. And in the last few years, we've also engaged in joint production, co-development, which ranges from BrahMos missiles, which have been very, very useful for us, to potential next-gen systems. But the question is, how are we shaping the future of this defense cooperation with a time-tested partner, so that cooperation in the times to come should be less about buying hardware, more about sharing technology and co-creating platforms, and which also aligns with India's defense indigenization goals?
Russia has been always most forthcoming in technology of transfer, whether it was the MiG, entire system was transferred. Sukhoi, much of it is being manufactured in India. The T-72 tanks and BrahMos. BrahMos is a joint venture. It has been jointly developed and deployed and manufactured between India and Russia. And you will recall our Arihant and the nuclear submarines. It is common knowledge that the miniaturization of the reactor, although designs came from Russia. So Russia has been much more forthcoming in tech transfer of technology. Like AK-47, that entire factory has been established in UP, and the technology is Russian. So it is a question of negotiations. It's a question of where we are headed. But Russia is a better and time-tested partner in transfer of technology as compared to, say, Americans have not transferred any technology to India ever. Even this LCA engine, the thing is going on for 2 years. After understanding between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, nothing has really moved. So France has transferred some technology. Israel has been transferring such technology. But in that, I think Russians have a very creditable track record.
Dr. Bansal, given that trust and given the kind of relationship that we have with Russia vis-a-vis another partner that we have, which is the United States, Russia has always backed India also at the United Nations when it has come to terror designations. In fact, during our research, I analyzed that each of our joint statement with Russia mentions terrorism very, very clearly and prominently. However, with now technology transforming the way terrorists operate, from cyber recruits happening to the drones to the financing and the challenges that we saw during Operation Sindoor, it's a completely new kind of warfare. How do you see India-Russia cooperation evolve into dealing with challenges which relates to more of intelligence sharing, more of tech-based counter-terror framework?
See, we have had a robust relationship as far as equipment, etc., has been the case. We have not been really having that sort of intelligence sharing for some time, at least, what I understand in post-Soviet world. But wherever their common interests are there, we are sharing information. What is more important is that with the change of times, now the defense collaboration is not only one way. There is feasibility of exporting certain defense armament to Russia. We saw during the Russia-Ukraine war that Russians fighting with Iranian drones. Now, India is also emerging as a major drone manufacturing hub. So maybe in times to come, we could be in a position to supply to Russia, that sort of a thing. India's software industry could integrate many of these systems, low cost systems, and create a viable system for Russians to import. So that's also a feasibility. But I'm sure, I think as times go by, we will see greater cooperation even in this field. Of course, let me put it very clearly that as long as the conflict goes on between Russia and Ukraine, it does put some restrictions on India as far as collaborating with Russia in this field is concerned, because India definitely doesn't want to aggravate a conflict. Yes. And large number of countries, and India has a stake in stopping this conflict. We have been trying our level best, and we would want that this conflict should stop. But as friends, we would want that the trade and other issues continue unabated, and things progress. As I said, because we have trust, and I think more importantly, more than the governments, it is the public which trusts Russians. True. And this is a very important facet which you need to understand. That with
that's
America,
why, despite the changing global equation, India and Russia have always proved that our relationship is not just bonded in history. We are also making a future together in terms of dealing with contemporary challenges, as well as engaging in newer areas where there is potential. When it comes to India-Russia, the conversation can go on for hours together, but for now we'll have to wrap up the conversation. We've already exceeded time. Thank you once again, Ambassador and Dr. Bansal, for joining us on the show today, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. To you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.